Hey guys, Pat Parker here with 52 Books, coming at you from another of my favorite reading nooks. This is one of the porches on the house that I grew up on, and my mom was always growing plants or flowers or ferns or that sort of thing on this porch. So when I inherited the house, I put up these shades to make it a little bit shadier, and now it's one of my favorite reading nooks. So one of the things that y'all mentioned in a poll was that you wanted longer, more detailed reviews of specific books, and so here I am to do what y'all tell me. This is going to be a review of The Hangman's Daughter by Oliver Potzsch. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a German name. So just the facts and stats. The title is Hangman's Daughter. The author is Oliver Potzsch. Translated by Lee Chedine, illustrated by Ben Gibson. It was published in Germany in 2008 and translated and published here in the United States in 2011. I read it at that time and enjoyed it and figured I would reread it now. 448 pages, book one of a 7-part series. I have only read, I think, the first 4 of the 7 books. I'm not sure if the 5th, 6th, and 7th books were published in the United States by the time I set the series down. It is historical fiction about the author's great-great-grandfather, I think, in a little town in Germany named Schongau, and it takes place in or around 1660, I think, and the protagonist is a executioner or a hangman in Schongau, Germany, and the because of the remote time period and the medieval feel, and because of the crazy characters that you meet, it really feels like a fantasy novel, but it's actually historical fiction. So that sort of brings us back to that video that I did a couple of weeks ago about what even is fantasy literature. I'll link that up here so that you can check that out. Hangman's Daughter was one of the first books that was published by Amazon when they started this Amazon Crossings thing. They started an imprint to translate and publish foreign books, and that was in 2007 or 8 or so, and they this was one of the first books that they published under that Amazon Crossing imprint, and it was highly successful back then, which is when I picked it up and read it and enjoyed it, and so I figured I would reread it and give you some more details besides, oh, I liked it. So it's about an executioner in Schongau, Germany, a few years after the bloody, violent 30 Years' War. I think that in the United States, probably, the 30 Years' War is glossed over in our histories, but from what I've heard, it was an extremely violent, dangerous period in Europe, and the men that came out of that and survived it, the soldiers that survived it, wound up being extremely hard men. So the protagonist is the hangman that used to be a soldier during the 30 Years' War, a friend of the hangman's. The midwife that birthed all of his kids winds up being accused of witchcraft because some children began turning up missing. They're kidnapped. Some of them wind up murdered, and so this the town's blame falls on this midwife, who the executioner is bound by his job and his honor to torture to try to extract a confession out of and then execute once he has tortured her. But she's his friend, longtime friend, so the book is about him trying to delay the torture and the execution long enough for him to figure out who the actual kidnapper and murderer is. I won't give you much more than that because I wouldn't want to spoil it. The translator did a fantastic job on this. You know, I'm sure you can imagine how easy it is to lose something in translation between German and here, but the translation is very simple, straightforward, active language, and it's easy to read, and I think he does a good job of translating idiom and that sort of thing, almost without exception. Now, one of the things that I did think may have been lost in translation or something is the actual title of the book, The Hangman's Daughter, because the daughter of the hangman really plays a very minimal role in this book. She appears throughout the book. It's a grown young adult daughter of the hangman, and she appears throughout the book and takes part in the investigation as to who the actual killers are, but she doesn't really have a major role. I think her role, if I'm remembering correctly, becomes more prominent in the future books, but I was curious as to why they called this first one The Hangman's Daughter, when the hangman is the actual protagonist. The story is superbly paced. It picks up speed consistently and gains tension and immediacy throughout the story, all the way up to the end. It is a very easy, very fast, well-paced read. Now, the denouement, or the epilogue, might have been a touch long, so the action builds and builds and builds, and then there's a climax, and then the story is supposed to be over relatively soon after that, but there's an epilogue, and there's the author's historical note at the end about how this is a fictionalized account of true people. But I think that the bit after the climax could have been shortened a touch. Also, one thing that I didn't like is I was really looking forward throughout the entire book to seeing the bad guy, once they caught him, tortured in a violent, gruesome way by this executioner, because that's what he does. That's his job, and the very beginning of the book describes in some gruesome detail what that executioner was about and his gruesome skills and that sort of thing. And so I knew for certain, not remembering the ending of the book from years ago, I knew that they were going to catch this bad guy and just torture the hell out of him and describe gruesome, terrible things that they do to him in retaliation for murdering these children. And no, that doesn't occur. The torture that does occur in the end of the book is glossed over or assumed or omitted, and I didn't like that, because I was, by the time they actually caught this perpetrator, I was ready for the executioner to come on stage and do his duty. So in conclusion, I would say that The Hangman's Daughter by Oliver Potzsch is 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. Definitely would recommend it. I would read it again, and I will probably continue reading the sequels.